Welcome back to the Space Gulag. Today we're going to be talking about what if Mace Windu fell in love with Anakin Skywalker. I know that's not what the thumbnail says, but I needed to get you all here to understand that I just pranked you. Happy April Fool's Day, my friends. Today, before we go any further though, I have to talk to you about one thing real quick. Subscribe for a chance to win a free lightsaber. 2, check out the Discord link down below. We have an awesome Discord server for everyone. All Star Wars fans are welcome. It's a very clean community. We're very friendly with each other. And also subscribe to the awesome channels. Let's get straight into the theory. Today we'll be discussing what would have happened if Sheev Palpatine, the Dark Lord of the Sith in the canonical timeline, was born into the Jedi Order. Would Palpatine be drawn to the darkness that was so inherently present in him in the Skywalker saga, or would he become a product of the Jedi Order? The story would begin during 82 BBY on the planet of Naboo, the day Palpatine is born. Let's get straight into it. Sheev Palpatine is born into the aristocratic house of Palpatine on a beautiful planet named Naboo. Instead of eventually indoctrinating himself inside of the Galactic Republic Senate, he would be picked up by a Jedi passing through Naboo within days of his birth. Palpatine would be brought back to the Great Jedi Temple on Coruscant. Sheev was quite incredible. He had a very high midichlorian count, and the High Council took interest in the child. They thought to themselves, wondering if Palpatine would be the chosen one, the prophesized chosen one, if it was possible, but the Sith hadn't been around or seen in millennia. It was possible that they could return, but there was no need to believe that they'd even appear for the rest of Grandmaster Yoda's life, which had at least 100 years to go left in it. Though, Yoda wanted the Council to keep an eye on Sheev as he progressed through his training. Yoda this time was keeping close with a student by the name of Dooku, his personal apprentice, and he was very prideful of his young student, and had been teaching him up for several years up until this point. Young Sheev, as he would begin his youngling training, would grow exceptionally fast though. He was a very powerful young child, but there was also something dark about the boy. The Jedi monitored it, but Palpatine was very obviously drawn into the darkness, though it wasn't exactly the most uncommon thing the Jedi had ever seen. There were always younglings drawn to the darkness. They were kids, after all. Children didn't know how to control their emotions. Palpatine, though, was a little bit deeper than the rest of his class, but the Jedi didn't really want to try and control it at this point. It was almost as if young Sheev fed off of these powers, but it didn't mean that the Jedi would treat him any differently. They continued to welcome him, and they worked the darkness out of him during his training. Palpatine wasn't fully rid of the darkness, but as he grew and began to mature, it started to mellow out. Palpatine was able to grow into the top of his class continually, year after year, and class after class. He was incredible with a lightsaber, even at his young age. Palpatine glided around the room as if it were natural for him to wield his blade. Even more than that, Sheev was incredibly talented with the Force. Since Grandmaster Yoda at this point was no longer watching over Dooku, he began to take interest in Sheev. His former student Dooku was growing well into knighthood, and even though Dooku was meant to be Yoda's last student, maybe Yoda should take one more. It was done. And so, as the years passed and Sheev became of age to become an apprentice, he was taken under the wing of Grandmaster Yoda. Sheev grew even faster while being trained by Yoda. Sheev impressed Yoda very much, and Yoda was very prideful at his young apprentice. At this point, Sheev was a young teenager, and all of that darkness that had been seen within him was almost dissipated. It was mostly gone. Yoda still saw some indication that Palpatine himself was controlled by a little bit of darkness. It wasn't much, but it was enough to make Yoda wonder about his apprentice. But he didn't want to push too hard, because he could turn his apprentice against him. Rather, he allowed Palpatine to use it. It really wasn't every day that a Jedi found a way to harness both the light and the dark usefully. And it was obvious from a young age that Palpatine was a brilliant young Jedi, and Sheev began to use his Jedi studies to influence his fighting style. Palpatine studied great beasts from across the galaxy, and he used various styles from these creatures in combat when he trained with Yoda. Sheev was interested in expanding his knowledge beyond what his teacher was teaching him and what he was willing to share with him. Palpatine spent hours in the Jedi archives talking to a middle-aged archivist known as Jocasta Nu. The two would grow a nice bond because Jocasta Nu was always willing to help an eager student such as Sheev. Palpatine was proficient in a few lightsaber forms before he reached the trials. He was mighty and powerful, and since Palpatine was a very talkative young Jedi, he found that he had a lot of older friends within the Order. Most of these friends were actually masters, and one of these masters was Master Dooku. The two had a fondness for one another. Dooku wasn't much more than 15 years older than Sheev, but he respected how eager the young Jedi was. The two Jedi would spar often, and Dooku would continuously best Palpatine. Palpatine would also pass his trials by this time, and being so close to Dooku meant that he also was close to Dooku's apprentice, Qui-Gon Jinn. Palpatine would go years without an apprentice. He would go on missions with his former master to bring peace to the galaxy. Sheev was actually very passionate about helping people who needed help, and he was very staunch on stopping slavery within the Republic. Palpatine, though, didn't always see eye to eye with the direction of the Jedi Council, and when it came time for Master Dooku to be welcomed to the Jedi Council, Dooku told the Council that he would think about it. Then Dooku talked to his young friend, Palpatine, who told Dooku to think about this another way. Sheev told Dooku that it were the will of the Force that the Council wanted him to be a member. He didn't have to serve a lifetime, but if he did, he could drastically affect the Council's decisions. Dooku didn't really understand what Sheev was talking to him about, so Sheev went a little bit further. If Dooku were on the Council, he'd be able to help the Council change their ways into what the code represented. Dooku understood that his young friend was telling him to take a position on the Council and kind of change how the Order was perceiving the Jedi Code. And though it wouldn't be a lifetime position, the position that Dooku took would be a 10-year position. Though it was time for Palpatine to take on an apprentice of himself, and there was a young boy that reminded him of himself. The boy was the top of his class, and his homeworld was Haran Kal. His name was Mace Windu, and Palpatine selected him to be his first student. Mace and Sheev immediately grew a tight bond. They were almost mirrors of one another, and though Palpatine had mastered all 7 lightsaber forms, he was proficient in a form that he was calling Vapad. Form 7, as he referred to it to other Jedi, used a balance of dark and light. For Palpatine, this form was his bread and butter. Though he was a Jedi and a good man, he was drawn to darkness. Using Form 7 allowed him to harness those abilities without changing anything about himself. It seemed immediate at first that his apprentice Windu had some affinity for the darkness. The boy was also very impatient, but Palpatine knew he was going to become a great Jedi. During their training, Palpatine made it a point to refuse to express personal feelings of the Order to Mace. Windu had his own opinion, but Sheev wanted his student to grow without a biased opinion towards the Order. Though as a student, Sheev and Mace Windu would grow to be a lot like each other. They both had ideals about how the Order should be less politicized, and a lot of this came from Dooku. It passed down through Sheev into Windu, which was coincidental, and all of which were some of the best the Order had to offer, Dooku, Windu, and Sheev. They would make a point to feel that the Order wasn't serving its mandate to the Galactic Republic. There were still extreme amounts of slavery and piracy in the Outer Rim, and the Jedi weren't doing enough for it. Dooku, Palpatine, Windu, and Qui-Gon all felt very similarly about this, though with Dooku on the Jedi Council, he was able to influence the Jedi to not make tragic missteps in their decision-making. With Windu passing the Jedi trials, Sheev was also offered a position on the High Council for his extraordinary mastery of a lightsaber and his ability to use the Force proficiently. Dooku still had some time left on the Council, and it wouldn't be long before Mace Windu would be offered a spot on the Jedi Council. But first, Sheev and his former apprentice would embark for the Outer Rim, to end a political dispute on some of the various systems between the Pikes and an easily influenced star system. When the Jedi arrived, it led to a firefight. The Jedi hadn't realized how deep the plot went. The Pikes had broken several agreements by setting foot on Jabba the Hutt's territory. For the Jedi, this meant that they were coincidentally protecting Jabba's land. But no matter, Sheev and Mace were fighting back a group of Pike insurgents in the streets of Mos Eisley. The battle raged on through the street, as the 2 amethyst blades deflected blaster bolts back into the Pike's grunts. Sheev pulled out his second blade and whipped it down the street at the incoming soldiers. He told his former student to make sure all the people got inside, all the civilians needed to get away from the battle that ensued in the street. The Jedi were being pushed back. It wasn't that Mace and Sheev were inferior, but it was the overwhelming amounts of Pike Syndicate members that were trying to kill the Jedi, and the Jedi were trying to avoid any civilian casualties. Suddenly, from behind their backs, a swarm of pirates came to their aid. Simply one of the most bizarre occurrences, pirates and Jedi fighting together. But Jabba was appreciative for the Jedi's assistance, and though the Jedi were to settle a dispute between the Pikes and the mayor of Mos Eisley, they had a new business to pursue with Jabba. Because the Jedi had helped Jabba deal with the Pike Syndicate, they wanted something in return. And because the Jedi didn't have enough power to overwhelm the Hutt clans, they demanded that Tatooine obey the Republic's laws on slavery. Jabba was reluctant. There were much worse things that the Jedi could have asked for, though. Jabba still had what made him most of his money, which was gambling, piracy, bounties, and smugglers. The Jedi and Jabba negotiated a deal, and the Jedi left the palace feeling accomplished, though Mace felt troubled. When Sheev asked his apprentice what it was and what would happen, Windu told his master that he was guiding civilians away from the conflict, and he felt the power of the Force. Sheev was curious, and so Mace told Sheev that the essence was greater than that of even Master Yoda. Sheev asked to be taken there immediately, so Mace and his master went back to Mos Eisley. They searched for hours to find the mother and child that they had passed on the streets. Sheev told Mace that they were going about this wrong, so he told Mace to kneel. The two Jedi kneeled and meditated. Sheev placed his hand on Windu's shoulder so that he could feel what it was that Windu was looking for. Almost immediately, they were able to locate the child. It wasn't that Mace lacked power, he came into that naturally, but Sheev had spent more time with the arts of the Force, and he was able to find the child faster. Mace's master was truly masterful with the Force. The two Jedi made their way for a small home located in a complex building with several homes within it. They felt through the Force and found the door, and so they knocked on the door. And when the door was answered, it was a young woman. She asked who they were and what they wanted, and Mace explained that they were Jedi, who had just protected Mos Eisley. Mace then explained that he had felt a presence in the Force, and that presence was extremely powerful, and he was to believe it was her child. Shmi Skywalker was taken aback by this, but because the Jedi had saved her, and she allowed them into her home to see the child. When the two Jedi went to the child, they extracted a DNA sample so that they could analyze it. The sample was sent back to Coruscant through the ships that they had arrived on. They talked with Shmi for a while and were able to gather some basic information, especially some regarding Shmi herself. She was a slave, and the boy had no father. The Jedi informed her that due to the Jedi's help with the local dispute, the local crime lord Jabba the Hutt banned slavery on Tatooine. Shmi would be excited to hear this, though the Jedi were very confused about how the boy was born. She continued telling them that the boy was just given to her, without the need for a father. The DNA sample returned and it checked out. The child Anakin Skywalker was not just a powerful young being, but he had a midichlorian count higher than that of Grandmaster Yoda. The Jedi told Shmi that they would not take the child without her permission. Shmi thought nothing negative of the idea of Anakin becoming a Jedi. It was better than growing up on Tatooine. After all, if he was to become the most powerful Jedi the Order had ever seen, would it not be worth it to let him grow prosperly there rather than stuck on the sandy rock of Tatooine forever? Shmi told the Jedi that she wanted better for her son, so baby Anakin Skywalker was taken back to the Jedi Temple in 42 BBY. When Palpatine and Windu returned from their mission, Palpatine started his seat on the High Council, as Windu prepared himself to have a chance on the Council as well. As the years before Tatooine passed, Dooku's time on the Council was coming to an end. But instead of renouncing his spot on the Council, Dooku kept his seat alongside of his friend Sheev Palpatine. As Anakin was just a baby, the Council would be watching his career with great interest. Not more than 2 years following, Qui-Gon Jinn, Dooku's former apprentice, would also be offered a spot on the Jedi Council, of which he would take. The Council was full of bright-minded individuals such as Dooku, Sheev, Qui-Gon, Plo Koon, and Yaddle, while there were others on the Council, such as Ki-Adi-Mundi, who didn't share a lot of similar interests. The Council was beginning to have a change of motive. It wouldn't be much longer before Mace Windu would join the Jedi Council with his former master. The Jedi Council's future was bright. The Jedi Council's future was brighter than it had ever looked before. Minds full of optimism for the future, while at the same time, the Jedi Code was loosened for all Jedi. Because of the overwhelming number of council members who believed in this ideology, the ideologies of the Order were beginning to shift, and their loyalties also began to shift. Years would come to pass, as Obi-Wan Kenobi, the apprentice of council member Qui-Gon Jinn, would pass his trials, and Anakin Skywalker would be up for debate as to who would train the boy. The council believed Sheev because of the fine job he had done with Windu. he'd be responsible for the training of the Jedi's chosen one. Anakin was much like Sheev and Mace, and they all had a tendency for the dark side. Because of this, Palpatine would begin to train Anakin. The two formed an immediate bond over their natural pull of the darkness, though because Palpatine was extremely well versed in the knowledge of the Force and how to use both the light and the dark, Anakin would excel like nothing before. He was already at the top of his class, but now Anakin would become more powerful than any Jedi. Anakin, having been trained from birth, would be much more powerful than any being within the Jedi Temple. Palpatine also believed that, though the Council had thought he were the Chosen One, it was actually Anakin that was in fact the Chosen One. This actually startled Palpatine a little bit. Some of the Council thought that he were insane for believing this, but Sheev thought that the Sith would return during Anakin's life. It wasn't a new thought, but the fact was that the Republic was growing darker and the Force itself had changed. A tide had turned, and the Jedi and the High Council had felt it. Sheev became obsessed with this, because he didn't want the Order he had served his entire life to crumble. Sheev was very dedicated to the Council and the Order itself, of which he loved dearly. He wanted to travel to the ancient homeworlds of the Sith to see what could be uncovered, though he believed a group of Jedi should go together, when the Chosen One was officially a Jedi Knight. Palpatine believed that it were truly Anakin's job to bring balance to the Force, if indeed he were the Chosen One, and even though Anakin was powerful, within the next 10 years, Anakin would excel rapidly. With a steadfast, experienced teacher such as Sheev, he was able to grow into a great Jedi, a Jedi that no Force in the universe would be able to stand up to. Anakin wasn't overconfident, but he believed in himself, and he was truly the product of Sheev Palpatine. It were time for the Jedi to go out into the darkness and find and destroy the ancient Sith rival for good. An expedition group of 20 or so Jedi went to the Sith homeworld of Korriban. Yoda, Palpatine, Dooku, Jin, Kenobi, Skywalker, Windu, Mundi, Kun, and a handful of others were sent. The Order on Coruscant was not undefended. Half the Jedi Council was still present during this period. As they landed on the desolate homeworld of the Sith, there was a shuttle that was still present. It was a new shuttle. It wasn't of the Old Republic. It meant that the Sith had truly returned, because not even pirates or smugglers went to the planet like this. There was no profit in it. So the group of Jedi moved towards the temple slowly. Yoda walked with the group, keeping pace. It was tense. The Force was out of balance here. Each and every Jedi felt it. But then it was growing into darkness. There was so much darkness. It felt cold. And it was a desert planet. And it was moving towards them. The darkness was moving towards the Jedi. The Jedi got into a defensive position. Without igniting their lightsabers, each and every Jedi had the other Jedi's back. The darkness then dissipated, and so the Jedi continued ever so slowly into the broken temple of the ancient Sith. Palpatine asked the Grand Master to take lead, and so he did. Palpatine went before the group of Jedi and took out his lightsabers, hovering his fingers over the blade's ignitions. Silence. Not a sound. No movement. Everything was still. Then Sheev felt drawn, and so he moved forward steadily. It was something so dark, it was pulling at him. Not just him, though. Windu and Anakin got close to their master as they followed him closely. They felt it too. As the group of Jedi followed deeper and deeper into the temple, they saw lights and then heard voices. It wasn't lights, though. It was lightning emanating from a red Zabrak and a large, cloaked Mun. Palpatine recognized it from his studies in the archives. It was the ancient dialect of the Sith. But something incredible happened. A small child was formed out of nowhere before the two Sith. They figured out how to do it. Palpatine then realized what was happening. The Sith were creating a legion of Force-adept, lethal, evil beings meant to serve the Dark Lord of the Sith. The Jedi couldn't fail here. They sent one of their knights back to the ship to relay to Coruscant for more reinforcements. The Jedi creeped closer and closer, surrounding the Sith. But as they surrounded the Sith's position, they saw something even more alarming than the little children of the Force. It was a group of Sith, not much younger than Anakin. It must have meant that the Sith learned how to perfectly manipulate the Force. The Jedi readied themselves, and without a moment hesitation, the Jedi ignited their blades and jumped into combat. The few Sith who were younger than Anakin stood dormant. They were completely subservient to their master. Palpatine and Skywalker engaged the two Sith standing over the altar. Plagueis and Maul engaged their enemy in hopes of severely damaging the Jedi Order. Plagueis spoke in Sith dialect, and his little group of Force users came to life. Lightsabers ignited, and a mixture of colors collided, like the ancient wars. It was Jedi versus Sith in their final chaotic showdown. The Jedi couldn't lose anyone. This fight was crucial to stop the outpour of the Sith in the galaxy. As Palpatine and Plagueis collided blades, it was stiff resistance, but for Anakin, he was able to kill Maul and make his way through the several disciples of Plagueis with ease. Anakin was beyond powerful, but these Sith, they felt so similar to Anakin. It was almost as if they were a part of him. Anakin clashed blades with one of the disciples, who it was like looking in a mirror. Not physically, though. Rather, the Force essence was exactly the same Not physically, though. Rather, the Force essence was exactly the same as Anakin's. Windu confronted one of these Sith, and their duel began. But for Mace, it wasn't just one of them. He was taking on two of the Sith at this time. Though it wasn't a problem. Using Shatterpoint, Windu was able to make his way through the Sith. For most of the Jedi, most of these Sith weren't even a problem. The truth is that even though they were born of the Force, perfect creations of darkness, they were meant to balance out Anakin. But only one of these Sith was as powerful as Skywalker. It was the balance to Skywalker's power, and the two were interlocked in fierce combat. As the rest of the Jedi present were able to easily kill off the other Sith, because the Force seeks balance, the Sith created by Plagueis got weaker and weaker with the Force. As Plagueis built a following, it was a following that was built on sand, and it was falling apart before his eyes. Worse, his apprentice Maul had died as well. Plagueis was the last Sith Lord, and he was losing his duel to one of the Council's most influential members. Sheev beat back the Sith Lord, striking at his opponent's blade. Plagueis stood no chance, as Sheev killed the Sith Lord. The Jedi watched as Anakin started gaining the upper hand on the evil adaptation of himself. The battle drew out as blades flashed, and though it was evident to the Jedi watching that Anakin was superior in the Force, Anakin was relentless, using Vapad and Shatterpoint to cripple the Sith and kill him. As the Jedi stood around in victory, there was silence. The Jedi decided that it were time to erase the evil religion from Korriban. Members grabbed detonators and placed them throughout the temple, on the coffins and in the scientific study room that belonged to Plagueis. The temple was then leveled to the ground, into a pile of rubble. It made sense, though. To Anakin and the rest of the Council, they understood that the creations of Plagueis were meant to balance out Anakin, and what that meant is that they were meant to balance out Anakin, and because there were so many of them, the balance wasn't evenly distributed. One of them was as powerful as Anakin, but the rest of them were weaker than even a Jedi youngling. On their way back to the Jedi Temple on Coruscant, one of the Jedi's bright knights wasn't acting like himself. Obi-Wan was full of inconsistent behavior. He was stumbling over his words, and some of what he was saying sounded like what the Sith had been saying at the altar. Sheev kneeled down next to his friend's apprentice and peered into his mind by using the Force, and he saw nothing but darkness. Before Sheev could ask Grandmaster Yoda to join him, he was sent across the shuttle into the wall, which knocked him out. All the Jedi in the cabin rose to stop Kenobi. He was possessed, and they were in hyperspace. If he did anything, he could kill everyone in the ship, including himself. Plo Koon and Dooku told Kenobi to stand down, but more Sith dialect came from his mouth. Then Kenobi ignited a blade. He needed to be stopped before he tore open the hull, killing everyone on board. When Kenobi turned and lifted his blade, he was hit with electric judgment. It wasn't painful for Kenobi, but it was stunning him. Dooku and Plo Koon pushed towards Kenobi, and eventually he fell over and was knocked out. Yoda knelt down next to Kenobi and looked inside of his mind, while Windu and Skywalker checked on their master. Sheev was alright, but Yoda didn't see the darkness. It was a Sith Lord, one of ancient powers. Yoda knew his name. He was the reason, after all, that the Sith had lived for so long. Lord Bane, responsible for the rule of two, looked through Kenobi's mind at Yoda and snarled. He told Yoda that he'd have to sacrifice Kenobi to get rid of the Sith forever. Bane knew this was the perfect move, because he knew that it wasn't within the Jedi's capability to hurt someone without reason or provocation. Bane may have been right, but Master Yoda had a plan. He left Kenobi's mind and went to the bridge of the ship and relayed a call back to Coruscant. The shuttle finally arrived from hyperspace as it entered Coruscant's atmosphere. Yoda called the temple to let them know of their arrival, and when they landed, younger knights were ushered off the shuttle, and Sheev was up and moving about again. He had hit his head pretty hard, and he was being taken back to the medical bay by his friend Dooku. From the landing pad came in Jedi archivist Jocasta Nu. She was carrying an ancient set of Jedi relics that hadn't been seen since the time of the Old Republic. Jocasta Nu ran to Kenobi's side as he was awakening, growling in the Sith language and groaning like a madman. Jocasta reached out to him with the Force and asked the other masters present to do so. Mundi, Kun, Yoda, Jin, and even Skywalker reached out to aid her in ridding the Sith from Kenobi's mind. She then used one of the ancient Jedi relics and drew at Darth Bane, but it wasn't enough. From her hand she pulled out a lightsaber, not just any lightsaber. It was the first one ever constructed by a Jedi of the Order. It emanated with yellow, and then a screech was heard. Jocasta Nu used the Force to levitate the blade over Kenobi, and she opened one of the ancient texts and spoke from it. It wasn't long until Kenobi's eyes returned to their normal blue color and the soul of Darth Bane was captured within the cell of the Force. Jocasta Nu requested that a traditional fire occurred that night. Yoda approved, and so as the day turned into dusk, the Jedi Council gathered in the sacred grounds of the temple that were used for expelling evil. The only one present who wasn't a master was Skywalker. The fire was lit and the capsule that held the soul of the last Sith was expunged. The Sith were gone forever. Their evil religion was dead, and the Jedi brought upon themselves balance. It wouldn't be long before Master Yoda requested that Sheev become the Grand Master, as Yoda stepped down into the role of Master of the Order. Dooku, Windu, and Jin would be leading members in the High Council and serve the Jedi Order dutifully. It wouldn't be long before Obi-Wan Kenobi took on an apprentice named Caleb Dune, and Anakin Skywalker took on an apprentice named Ahsoka Tano. Through their shared bonding over being masters, two students around the same age, they grew into a brotherhood of bonding. As for the Jedi and the Republic, they would work closely, not politically, but to bring peace and justice to the Outer Rim. She would be tasked with teaching students who were drawn into the darkness, as it was already moving this way, but the Order finally opened its rules and were not products of the Jedi Code. Kenobi would be a lot like his master, Qui-Gon Jinn, and Skywalker, Windu, and Sheev would behave like a family. There would be complete peace in the time of the Republic and the Jedi Order. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the true story of what would have happened if Sheev Palpatine was a Jedi. I really like this one. I'm really happy with how this turned out. As you guys know, I'm sure a lot of people who have seen anything about the theory popping up anywhere assume this was going to be a dark side story, and I don't want to do that. That doesn't make any sense to me. If he's a Jedi and brought to the Council early, he's going to act like a Jedi. He's going to be brought up like a Jedi, and I think it makes perfect sense for him to be the one to adopt Form 7 through his studies. As we know, I used a lot of characteristics that we've seen from Palpatine within the stories, and he's very interested in his archives and in the deep lore of Star Wars itself. He's very interested in the in-canon lore within canon, and I wanted that to be a part of my canon and story. I think Palpatine himself would be very interested in learning and would excel in lightsaber forms and Force abilities, and I wanted that to be prominent within the story. I think without that, I don't think this would have been a true story of Palpatine, because if Palpatine was born into the Order, I think he would have been the first Mace Windu, because if you guys don't know, Mace Windu, I think it is in canon, is the one that really adopted Vaapad into his lightsaber form. Like, he made Vaapad a thing by using both light and dark. I think that would be Palpatine here. And this creates a perfect avenue for Palpatine to train Anakin and to train Windu, which I think would be a lot of fun, and I think that was a lot of fun about this theory. One other thing, you guys might be asking about the Clone Wars and all that stuff. No, I didn't want to do that. Because Plagueis was the big baddie in this story, I wanted him to be lurking in the darkness like he was in canon. He was very, very in the dark, very hidden, and he was very interested in the Force, and I wanted that to be pretty prevalent when I was talking about him and Maul, who was also in the dark. One thing that I thought was really crucial to the story was the legion of Force users that Plagueis had created. Because he was creating a legion to be the greatest users in the Force wouldn't allow this. yes, they had already created the mirror, the perfect image of light, which would have been Anakin, who was also drawn to darkness, but the one to bring balance to the Force. I think that if Plagueis kept maneuvering with it and kept playing with it, he would have created actual dark side acolytes, but they would have balanced out Anakin. The first one would have been a perfect balance for Anakin, and the rest of them would have been just weaker than a youngling, and that's what I was trying to explain here. Though it was like quantity over quality, and that was what Plagueis' issue was. And Anakin in this story being 20, he would have been extremely powerful. I mean, he would have been more powerful than he was even as Vader in Revenge of the Sith. So I was trying to convey that as well. So I hope you guys enjoyed this. I know you guys know that I try and stay true to the characters, and that's what I was trying to do here. And I think if Palpatine was the dark side, that wouldn't have been true to his character. I think he would have stayed into his character within his story, which still being, influenced by darkness. I thought it was cool to make that actually kind of a normal thing for the Jedi to deal with, like having a child be brought up in the Order that was already kind of attuned to the darkness, because, I mean, kids are evil. Kids are straight up evil. I mean, have you ever met one? Yes, they are evil. They're always planning your downfall. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this. If you guys did enjoy, leave a like down below. I hope you guys love this. Check out our Discord, check out my channel, subscribe for a chance to win a free lightsaber, and I will also see you guys later. Spread the love, and always remember, may the Force be with you.